Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Today's program is a little different from the other ones. Of course, I am interviewing a woman for this particular program, but I would like to mention that it is going to be a very sensitive program. So viewer discretion is advised right now. The topic of today's program is going to be incest or sexual abuse or abuse. And the person that I'm interviewing has written a beautiful book called Love and Trauma. Her name is Mila Sharma, and she is our Woman in Focus today. Mila, you're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Thank you so much for having me today.
Mila, you've written this book, a memoir of a small girl who grew up.
Yes.
And you, by profession, are a registered nurse in British Columbia.
I am.
Abuse. And there are many kinds of abuse, right?
Yes.
There's physical, sexual, emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go through all three of?
I did.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Is it, I mean, I've looked at the book, I've read a little bit of the book, and I must admit that it is a very nicely written book. It talks about anger, it talks about who I am, what is love, what is forgiveness, what are your dreams, how to surrender to, so in a way, when I was reading it, I felt it was a therapeutic book that you'd written for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Was it how it was?
So the way that I had written this book, I wrote the majority of it in 16 days, all by hand and a lot of tears. And then I eventually went to go input it into the computer. So it was like a double whammy for me to experience it both ways.
Well, you were writing it all. Were you living it?
Yes. Yep. Hence the tears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of just letting go and just writing exactly what I needed to write. Yeah.
I talked about abuse, different kinds of abuse, and you said yes, you'd gone through all three kinds.
Yes.
So let's divide that and talk about it. Physical abuse. Who abused you?
My father and my brother, but majority my father.
And sexually?
My older male cousin. Yeah.
And emotionally?
Probably a little bit of both.
So when you were going through that, how old were you?
The sexual abuse started when I was 2 years old, and that's only because that's when my memory started to develop. And that progressed for about 7 years until I was 9 years old, until I was forced to move from Prince George, is where I grew up, Prince George, British Columbia, until I moved to Burnaby to live with my parents. And
those 9 years or 7 years that you mentioned just now?
Well, I technically moved to Prince George when I was 10 months old.
Oh, I see.
It was just that I remember the abuse starting when I was 2 years old.
So do you think that the abuse started even before that?
It's possible.
So the memory of abuse, when sexual abuse, what was it, your male cousin who touched you, different parts of your body? Was there a penetration as well?
No.
No.
No. Just touching and...
Did he want you to do something to him?
Yes.
And you had to do that?
Yeah.
At the age of 2, 3? And how old was he?
He was 11. I started going through puberty when I was 3 years old. I started developing hair in areas that obviously only a teenager would start to go through, but because of the sexual abuse and the way it was, I went through puberty a lot earlier than most people would.
And was that, didn't the doctors look at it and figure it out?
They looked at it, they didn't figure it out. They just thought that it was imbalanced hormones. Where I did go to BC Children's Hospital, and I do remember the physician asking me if she didn't actually ask me, but she told my parents if she were to go through puberty this early, and if it wasn't because of the imbalanced hormones, it was because of sexual contact, so genital to genital contact.
But did you have genital to genital contact?
Yeah.
You did at that age? So, did you tell anybody about this?
No,
Why not?
I didn't know. I didn't know it was wrong. I didn't know anything. I was just 2 years old when it started, and that was the beginning of everything. Like, it was done with kindness, it was done with love.
Yeah. So when you think about it now, are you angry?
I've let go of my anger and my resentment, and all of my shame and my guilt because of it. But it took a long, long, long time for me to get to this point.
Shame and guilt. Why
Yeah.
would you use those two words?
Because who wants to tell somebody that they were abused by a family member or anybody at that?
So you
And
feel,
it's, yeah, and I felt guilty that I don't know if it was my guilt or his guilt, but it's just, I don't even know where to go from here. It's just, there's a lot of emotions coming up for me right now. I'm just trying to process them.
did you ever confront him?
I did not in person. I did send him a text message.
And?
I was blocked and deleted. He never responded.
Did you ever tell your parents?
I did actually after this book was written.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was their reaction?
It was actually very supportive.
But if you had told them at that time, would they have been supportive?
When my brother had come out,
Yeah.
yeah. So my brother was actually also sexually abused by the same male cousin.
Holy mackerel, really?
Yeah, so I was actually living in Prince George with this family. So then when I would go on vacation to go see my sister in Burnaby, my brother would come and visit my Prince George family. And that's when the abuse started for him. So he was about 4 years old when it happened. And he came out about his story, it would have been 8 years ago at this point. And I only came out with my story last year.
So Mila, you also talk about this in the book, a burden. So this was a burden that you carried with you.
Yeah.
And then when you told your female cousins and your sister, you felt that you'd given this burden to them. You felt sad for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel, why do you, I mean,
I just thought it was something that I needed to protect everybody else from, because I saw all of the torture and the trauma that my brother had experienced when he came out, and nobody wanted to believe him. Nobody wanted to accept what had happened to him. And so based on that, then why would I also want to put myself out there?
I want to talk to you a little bit about writing the book and who do you think it's going to help, but let's take a short break and come back.
Okay.
Mila Sharma is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Mila Sharma. She is a registered nurse by profession, and we're talking about her life. She comes from a very well-known family. I know the family very well. Mila, you know, I look at this book, Love and Trauma. I look at this book and I think that you've written this not just to help your own self, but to other people who are going through it. And I asked you a couple of questions about, you know, different kinds of abuse. Now, sexual abuse, I think all kinds of abuse is horrendous anyway, but sexual abuse probably makes the person feel guilty. And that's why you use the word shame and guilt. When you were going through all that, you did not know it was not wrong, it was not right.
No.
That whatever was happening to you was wrong. But when he would say to you, don't tell anybody, this is our secret, what did you feel about that special?
I felt special. It was a game.
Yeah.
And what child doesn't want to have adult responsibilities?
Right.
You know, and it was just, yeah, something, and then he would like buy me food or something like that.
Right.
Like, let me stay up late just to watch special TV programs with
Right.
him. So it was always done with love and kindness, so I never knew it was wrong.
So people who are going through sexual abuse, either they become too sensitive to it or insensitive towards it. How do you think you reacted to your life growing after that incident, coming back to Burnaby and not staying with that guy?
I definitely became more fearful of men in general. And I tried not to put myself in predicaments, even going out and whatnot. I would basically try to avoid as much as I can, because when I would be in situations with a male person around me, it would just become, well, what does he want me to do? What am I supposed to do? I am supposed to be helping him, pleasing him. It was never about me, and I didn't have that ability to create boundaries, to say,
Right.
no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
This isn't my responsibility.
Right.
If you want this, you go somewhere else. But
Right.
it wasn't like that for me. Like, I didn't know how to say no. Like, there's certain situations, of course, but then there's other situations where you don't have that control, and you lose your ability to speak up and even protect yourself.
And you went through all that?
I did.
And so being fearful of being with men, is that why you haven't settled down? Typical Indian question.
Oh, I know. Probably one of the reasons I think I needed to go through all of these traumas and then grow up, deal with them, acknowledge them, and process them. I don't think I would have ever really been ready to settle down, no matter how much I wanted to. Like, I've always wanted to get married and settle down when I was
Right.
19 years old, and it never happened for me. So
Right.
then at some point I was just like, well, maybe it's not meant to.
Right.
But it was just, I think it wasn't meant to, because I was supposed to deal with these traumas first.
When you talk about the word trauma, obviously it has impacted you so deeply that it sort of subconsciously stops you, in a way, from being happy for yourself.
Yeah.
So this book, do you think it is going to help people? I mean, I look at it and you talk about a lot of things like therapies and be very careful who you go to, find a psychologist that is, you know,
Aware of your culture.
aware of your culture and all that. So do you think people are going to be able to use this book and help themselves?
Absolutely. So it's my journey, and it's also a teaching memoir. So it's everything that worked for me and how I process things. And so many people don't go to ask for help, or they don't know that they can ask for help, because especially in our society, it's frowned upon. It's everybody's like, oh, no, 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 like, it's an uncomfortable situation, we're not going to talk about it.
But it
and not
happens.
even just, exactly, and it's just not even our community, it's every community that this
Right.
happens.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, all the time. It's just nobody wants to talk about it because it's
Right.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And this is also probably the reason why I've lost a lot of people in my life too, because it's just something that nobody wants to deal with.
Do you think you will meet someone who will understand your situation and say to you, you know, I care about you as a person, and not that I want to heal you, but you know, you're healing yourself.
Yeah.
But I want to be there to comfort you.
Yeah. Everything happens in divine timing. So.
But you know, when you talk about abuse, right? You talked about physical abuse as well, right?
Yeah.
In your family, your brother and your dad, both, you know. What kind of abuse? I mean, slapping you or hitting you senseless?
Yeah, or dragging me downstairs.
Oh.
Pushing me up.
And that was, like, happened for long?
Since I was 9 years old when I moved there,
Yeah?
probably until maybe my early mid-20s.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And so, what would your mom do in cases like this?
She tried to stop things, but at the same token, she's a victim in her own way too.
Right. if your father was abusive, physically abusive towards you, so he was
Yeah.
to her as well.
Yeah, and it's all generational, right? And this is exactly what my brother had learned from my dad. So if my dad didn't have respect for me and didn't treat me properly like I was one of his own children, then what makes you think that my brother would? And the thing is too with my brother is that he never knew I went through any of this abuse. And so he was basically taking out all of his anger and resentment to that family towards me because I was still close with that Prince George family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so when you told him that whatever has happened to you has been happening to me, what was his reaction?
So I only told my brother last year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, January.
And?
And I took off every single bandage that he worked so hard to bandage himself up with. It all unraveled for him. I don't think he expected it. I don't think my parents expected it when I had told them to. And it's just something that you probably don't want to believe, like, what the hell, like, how can this happen to two kids in the same family? And I mean, he was supportive. His plan of action was, you know, you should go to the police and speak to them about it, especially if you think maybe he's doing this to his kids, his own kids.
Oh, so the male cousin is married, has got children.
Yeah.
And you think he is doing it to his own children?
I want to believe he's not, but...
But there are triggers, because I think triggers is something very important that you brought up. Look at them, and these are telltale signs that they can look at, right? Mila Sharma is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Mila Sharma, who's written a book called Love and Trauma, a memoir of a small girl who grew up. Yeah, she has grown up to be a very beautiful young woman.
Thank you.
Who has gone through turmoil in her life, and yet she smiles beautifully. And I think you're a very brave young woman to have written a book like this, to talk openly with me about this. You talk in the book, and you were telling me about some of the triggers that you saw and felt. I hope this cousin of yours is not abusing his own children. What are these triggers?
So one of the main triggers for me, specifically as a sexual abuse, was when I went to Prince George for my grandfather's funeral. So we hadn't spoken to this family for over 7 years at that point, after my brother had come out about his abuse. And so the only reason we went up is because we received a phone call from my uncle to say, your grandfather's passing away, come see him. And so I went up to Prince George with my mom and my sister. So we went there, all of our cousins were there, and their kids were all there as well. And so one of the nights, and I was drinking this entire time, and not realizing that I was drinking this entire visit because of this trauma that I was just trying to swallow and not deal with. I didn't realize that it affected me so much. And so one of the triggers was actually taking his daughter, so my male cousin's daughter, to bed. And so I carried her upstairs, and because she felt warm to me, I took off her pants, and she was completely asleep. So as I took off her pants, her underwear came down a bit on the sides, and she quickly pulled them up. And so I don't know if that's a normal reaction for a child or not, but for somebody who's been sexually abused for 7 years, then that was my first trigger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talked about you were drinking. So do you feel that there was this no love for yourself? You did not love yourself? You hated yourself, so you were destroying your own self? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I had love for myself. I felt like I had love for myself, but I don't think I had that deep-rooted love that one is supposed to have for themselves. So,
why? Somebody told you that you are not good enough to love yourself?
Yeah. Over and over again, and even going through these traumas too, and you're realizing that this isn't right. So, is only family supposed to love me? Like, I don't know. Like,
Mila,
Yeah.
drinking is something that you started doing. Have you stopped drinking now, or are you still one of those drunks?
day. No, I'm just
no, you're sober.
I am sober. I'm completely sober since April 2021.
Wow.
I wouldn't say that I had a huge addiction or anything like that,
Okay.
but I definitely realized that alcohol, I was using it to suppress all these emotions. And I had a lot of health issues going on with me too at the time, and I think a lot of it manifested because, and I'm going to say all of it manifested because of all of this unhealed childhood trauma that I didn't know that I needed to deal with.
You continued going to that family. You have a lot of love for that family, your aunt especially, your mother's sister,
Yeah.
and
My
your
dad's
dad's brother. So 2 sisters marrying 2 brothers.
Yeah.
So it's very, entrenched within the family, right? And having to deal with all that, how can you be one person who's out of that whole piece, and you're the one who's quote unquote the bad apple out of it? Is that how you felt?
After this whole experience coming out to
Yes.
everybody, yes. But I also am a survivor in all of this.
Yes, of
because
course you are.
I realized that what had happened to me wasn't right, and I dealt with it, and I healed from it. And so with me doing this, I'm hoping that I can heal all of our past generational traumas, including the future ones that are coming to this family. And that's my gift to my family as well as everybody else.
Now, if people wanted to read this book, where can they get it?
They can get it at any online retail stores, Amazon, Apple, Indigo, Target. Yeah.
It's one of the most difficult interviews that I have done. And I have known you as a child for many years.
Yeah.
And to know that someone that I knew had gone through all this shit, I am very sorry to hear that. But I am so proud of you that you're such a brave young woman, that you have dealt with it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being a woman in focus today.
Thank you.
Mila Sharma has been our woman in focus today. Don't go away, we'll be right back.